Welcome to the Power Hour, optometry's biggest and longest running show. I'm your host, Eugene Schatzman, and I want to ask you an important question. What does it actually mean to be the CEO of your practice? That's the question we discuss and really go deep on in today's episode. And I have an amazing guest for this episode because Dr. Nick Lillie has been working on trying to answer this question for the last 2 years as he's gone from doctor owner to true practice CEO. And I've had the pleasure to have kind of a front row seat to his success and his journey. And what makes Nick's story so interesting is that this is not just theory. His practice has continued to put up double-digit growth as return on his investment of creating this whole CEO mindset. And he's even seen double-digit growth this year in a market where many practices are starting to feel a lot of pressure. But the real story is not just growth, it's how he's building the machine behind it. So we talk about how Nick has moved from being the person with all the tribal knowledge, seeing lots of patients, and just having a well-paying job to creating systems that his team and his associates can actually follow. Things like phone calls, handoffs, farming, exam onlys, optical behavior, associate training, scorecards, meetings, and the kind of feedback loops that actually make these systems sticky and not just an idea of the day. And in the second half of the episode, actually, Nick turns the tables a little bit, asks me to give him some feedback on his next phase of growth as the CEO of his practice, where he's strong and where also he may be the bottleneck. So is what we talk about and what he can do next to make the business less dependent on him and to accelerate his growth and also his systematization of his business. So if you're trying to grow beyond yourself, train associates better, improve revenue per patient, reduce exam onlys, and just build a practice that can run on systems and can, as we say in the BOSS system, has optimization and scalability as core parts of the practice, then this is a really valuable conversation for you. As always, make sure you're subscribed on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen. If you have any questions, ideas, feedback, reach out to me at eugeneschatzman.com. I always enjoy feedback that comes in from these episodes. And now here's my conversation with Dr. Nick Lillie. Dr. Nick Lillie, welcome back to the Power Hour.
Thanks for having me, man. It's good to be back.
Yeah, it's always exciting to have you on the show. And last year, after we did your show just about a year ago, a lot of people wrote in and said, like, bring him back. He has a lot to offer. And I thought, what will be really interesting is to track your journey. And we'll talk about what that means specifically, but that's why I wanted to bring you back to the show. What's interesting for me, and I'm going to start with the results first. What's interesting for me is that your practice has had consistent, significant double-digit growth year over year over year. And I'll probably have you dig in and just kind of remind people where you started, what you're building. And you're not in like a super affluent area of the country. You're sort of in a pretty average neighborhood of Grand Rapids, Michigan, which I happen to know where that is, but it's not like you're outside of like a rapidly growing metropolis type of thing. Um, you're in a nice area, but I would say, there's not something about the area that's causing your growth. It is remarkable to me that there are certain things about your operation that are causing your growth, which we're going to talk about. But I just wanted to put this in the context because our listeners always ask me, and I will share some of this data. So in my organization, we track a significant amount of the revenue that's going through the doors of practices that we serve. So we're probably over $1 billion in revenue that we track. And that's significant because these are some of the better performing practices in the country, mostly independents. And what we have seen is that Q2 of 2026 is shaping up to be a negative quarter. This is the first time that we're tracking numbers since COVID, right? Like, let's just set that anomaly aside, but this is the first time in the last, call it 4 or 5 years, that I have seen a negative quarter where something didn't balance out. Even last year with tariffs, right? And we had the lowest consumer confidence that we on record based off of the University of Michigan study. Even last year, kind of our worst quarter was a quarter where there was 0.5% growth or something for the industry. But this year it's shaping up to be that, yeah, first quarter was good. It was double digit growth for the industry, but second quarter looks like a negative. And
even with that, I heard you tell me before the show that you guys have, and I looked at some of your numbers, you guys have double digit growth already this year, and you feel constrained. You know you're going to have more growth because you're adding another associate. So, with that in mind, your practice is remarkable for a number of reasons. And we're going to get into what some of those reasons are. But the premise for the show is that you have been on this journey of discovering what it means to be the CEO of your practice, Nick. And I'm really excited for you to tell people what you've discovered so far. In order for us to get there, just remind people in like a couple minutes of where your practice started, how you got into what you're doing, and also what made you decide to become the CEO of your practice a couple years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. So, uh, graduated in 2011, started cold, straight out of school, and for about 14 years there, uh, I was just trying to figure out what I was doing, what optometry was, the business side of it, and one of the things that I tried to do initially was try to be everything to everyone, and I really became nothing to no one, and that was bothersome. I wanted to have more of a fulfilling journey. I wanted to have a business, not a job. And the thing that really resonated with me is once I got married and had kids, I have 4 kids now. Uh, if I wasn't working, we wouldn't get paid. And that's akin to a really high paying, a lot of freedom, but a job. I was trading time for money. And I just saw the writing on the wall that I wanted to spend time with my family and I wanted to work on the business. And all I was doing was turning the refraction dial, being in the exam lane, and never accomplishing what I wanted to do from a business perspective. Um, Fast forward to 2023, and I fast forward to 2023, and what I really decided was let's make this a business. So I needed to hire an associate. Well, I was in 1,600 square feet, had one lane, and that just wasn't going to cut it. So we started the process, and I to full transparency, I work with an SG, and they were great at kind of this is a process that you need to go through. This is what you can prepare for. So I started getting a new building, and we started recruiting a doctor. Once I recruited a doctor, we aligned on the vision for where we wanted to be. And I think you've talked about this. I really believe that if you don't know where you're going, you can get it's scary because you can get anywhere, right? You have to have that North Star. So we set our vision to set a tertiary care dry eye clinic that also did primary care. And eventually we'll split the two. So we have Family Vision Optical and then Rejuvenation Dry Eye Center. Right now they're housed under the same roof, but we're eventually with the plan to separate the two. And in 24 we hired her. It was a little rough. I didn't really know what I didn't know, and the hardest part was I made the mistake of thinking I just needed to clone myself. If she can just do what I did, and I was doing like 1.3 million on my own, she can easily do that. But it didn't click, it didn't work, and she wasn't me. And what I realized was the tribal knowledge I had, the adjustments I would make on the fly, were my knowledge. They weren't what another doctor does. And so I had to take a step back and really break down my practice as a whole and build better systems. You know something about that, I think, right?
Yeah, might be
But
fun to compare notes on that, Nick.
yeah, but what we did was stop being so dependent on me to solve all the problems because I was the bottleneck for all of our growth. Everything would run through me. And if I didn't make a decision or make a choice, we couldn't move forward. Well, we got a better office manager. We hired more staff and gave them more autonomy. We set guardrails for our associate where she has autonomy to practice within what she feels comfortable doing, but she doesn't get outside of our core values, our core focus, and we're growing and thriving, man. It's been awesome.
And you're adding another associate this month, right?
Yep, yep. He graduated, new grad, and that's been a little different. The first associate was out for 3 years. She kind of knew the lay of the land, was experienced. The new grad's been an eye-opening experience because it's a lot more of a learning curve, but I've really enjoyed it because I'm taking the principles of what I did to grow the dry eye clinic and applying it to primary care with the hopes of he's going to be a dry eye doctor just like us. but there's so much correlation and foundation there that it's exciting to realize how much I actually know. But when you're teaching someone, the cool thing is you don't know why you do certain things, like why you prescribe a certain contact or do have a certain referral schedule. But when you have to explain to someone, you now are justifying and realizing, wait, I have a system. Let's write this down, and then we can
Yeah.
grow the business, man.
So have you been, as you've been training the newest associate, have you been documenting, or are you making him document? Well, how's it work?
So my office manager had a plan that we have when we hire a new staff member in general. I'm like, let's follow that template, but I'll cater it to what a doctor will be, what will be
Mhm.
relevant to him. And then I kind of looked at where he was weak or where maybe a little naive. One of the case in points is I in Elcon will or all the contact lens people will yell at me, but he's like, I really like multifocal contacts. I'm like, they're okay, but I don't prescribe them a whole bunch. He's like, well, I've had a lot of success. And I had to think to myself, why don't I prescribe more multifocals? And it came down to they cost a lot and the outcome isn't always perfect. So if they expect to see like they do out of their glasses, the contacts don't match up apples to apples. And I had him price out all of our contact lenses that we do in the office. And he said to our office manager, like, I think I'm doing this wrong. It's like $1,300. It's like, nope, that's what the cost is. He's like, oh, it kind of clicked. Like, I don't do it because the patient's paying for something that they're not getting the value that they perceive all the time. So if I can find a way to get them happy at a price point that works, we're happy as an office, the patient's happy, and he didn't realize that aspect. And that was an aspect that he didn't realize, but now I have a system. Like there's a reason why we prescribe things. Like how is it on the other side of the chair? If you're a patient, are you willing to pay this? Do you have the value in there? And we've documented everything that's come up along the way as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you're kind of like managing the patient's perception of value. But for anyone listening, and I think we talked about this in your last episode, you have a very significant average revenue per patient. Maybe share approximately what that is with the listeners, so they understand that you're not just trying to find the most cost effective solution for the patient. What's
Yeah,
your average revenue per patient?
we're roughly around $700-800 revenue per patient now. And before I hired the first associate, we're around $400. That was my where I was at.
This is
Be,
when you were still doing a job, and
yes,
then you started by building a vision. And we're going to talk about your steps, but you started by building a vision, and then you said, "Oh, if I follow this vision, I can implement systems that can ultimately help drive revenue per patient, and then possibly then drive revenue per patient for my associate, and then possibly drive a training system within my entire organization." But I kind of want to dissect this whole thing, right? I you mentioned this a second ago, is that you said you wanted to go from having a job to being a, the CEO of your business. So let's try to kind of break this down into multiple parts, and then we'll talk about them in more detail. What are the parts of becoming a CEO, Nick, that you have had to kind of work through or conquer as as you've thought about this?
and that's the ultimate question that this past year, 2 years, 5 years is everyone would say you need to be the CEO of your practice. And I would honestly ask myself, what does that mean? And what it came down to the basics, vision for where you want to be, because everything that you do has to be going towards that vision. If it doesn't align with where you want to be, don't make that choice. In addition to that, you have to have systems in place because systems scale. And if you're dependent on a technician, a manager, a doctor, you don't have a business. You have someone that is the bottleneck, that is the secret sauce. Well, if you want to start another business or a scale and have another location and you don't have that special person, does the system still work? So we started off with a vision, we created systems, and then developing people. Because if you're dependent on just hiring and they can do it, you're going to be it's a fine line for people that can do what we do in terms of the high revenue per patient. But if you can teach someone to do that, if you can teach your staff to do this, now you have something that can scale and grow. And that was hard for me to realize because I was always trying to optimize for myself and my strengths and weaknesses. Well, when the other doctor came in, my strengths are not her strengths. My weaknesses are not her weaknesses. And I was depressed in a sense that I look at her revenue per patient and my wife looked at me and said, well, shows that, she just has to learn a lot more. And I go, I actually see it the other way. It's that I don't have a business. I don't have a system in place that can support her. I need to create more systems and guardrails and guidance that I can plug anyone in and they still do that same revenue as I do. And that was what we kind of took a step back and saw where she was weak or where I was the bottleneck, and we created systems so that didn't happen anymore. And her revenue per patient started at like 350. She's at 600-700 herself. So she's done
Yeah.
great in the past year and a half.
Which I think is remarkable and impressive, and I'm really curious to see a year from now how your newest associate straight out of school is going to be doing. One of the things I wanted to ask you as you're talking about these systems is when you say you're developing a system, what does that mean start to finish? Like logistically, is there like a Google Doc somewhere on somebody's computer? Like what does it mean to have a system in your practice?
Case in point is when we make an appointment for a patient, there's a process that everyone goes through when you make an appointment. So what we did, I sat down with my office manager and said, what do we want to happen? What's the actual outcome? So we outlined it. And then we went to our staff and said, every single one of you, and we did this for every single step in the practice. What do you do when you make an appointment? And everyone wrote it down. And then we had a team meeting and we went over, okay, how do you make an appointment? These are the common things. Let's put this together, and we put our version of it on there, right? Because there's all the things that you have, and said, okay, this is what we think should happen. We took all of your answers and we kind of made up this. Let's refine this. And then they're like, oh, we should do this, or I wasn't doing that. And we got everyone to buy in. And now the system is something they signed off on, they created in
Hmm.
theory, but it's the outcome that we wanted. It's the version of it that we wanted, but now they have agency in it and everyone signed off on it. So now we can hold them accountable to that system. Same thing when we, you know, go into optical with a patient. Even with the second doctor I hired, the first thing I taught him, it's not dry eye. It's how you enter the room and how you start that conversation. We talked about being amazing is where you are the smartest person in the room. Where if you're extraordinary, that patient feels heard. They're like, he understood me. He spoke in a way that we now know what to do. And that's what our focus on was with him is how he makes them feel. And that's kind of the same thing that we've done with our staff is everything that we need to do does not need to be about us. How do we make this about the patient? And again, that's been our focus. And surprisingly, it's not hard to do, but no one does it. You walk in anywhere and you've walked into a million offices, Eugene. How many people like hold up a hand or no one even greets you at the front desk? It's an issue if someone walks in and we're not waving or saying hi. Opticians come from the optical if the techs are busy or the front desk is busy, but that's our culture. And that's because we have the system of you greet that patient the moment they walk into the office. Same thing with the doctor. When you go into that exam room, you're not washing your hands. You sit, you look them in the eye, and you listen for the first 60 seconds. Then you go and do your stuff. But
Do you ask is the first question you ask the same every single time?
there's a feel for it. And I try, and I didn't realize I did this until the associate, I had him shadow me, like come in and watch what I do. And when I first go into the exam, I try to make it not about the exam. They're thinking glasses, this. Hey, what's up, man? What's new? They're like, with light for my eyes. I go, anything. What's on your mind? And again, then you can go down a rabbit hole or whatnot. But I'm trying to connect with them as a person.
Hmm.
And then from there, we can make this exam about what they're going through, what they're experiencing. And when I've made that a focus, my exam only rate, Eugene, has been under 30% for the past 2 months.
That's
It's it's
incredible.
been it's been great because I'm connecting with them, and then when we go through that, I'm like, hey, I know you just moved, so we gotta give you, we'll ship these contacts to you. You don't have to come back, but I make my closing predicated on what I get from that opening introduction. And that's what we do when we make the appointment now is we're getting the information and then we're sending it. We have a sticky note in the exam and we're mirroring that after. Like, you were talking about how your eyes are watering all the time. Dr. Lillie is great with working with patients that have that. And then I talk about that. And then when I hand off, I'm also mentioning his eyes have been watering. We need to get him signed up for a tear film and lid evaluation, but we're using their language and consistently using it throughout the process. But that was a thing that we had to train every single one of our staff members. And we have a system now where we can know where that is, how to address it, and we coach them up on how to incorporate their needs into our normal process.
Got it. So I'm gonna, if it's okay with you, I'm gonna get super granular with you just to help people understand the level of systemization that you're at now and maybe where you're going to. So first of all, on the phones, right? Do you feel like your phones are answered the same way every single time and the same questions are asked every single time? Do you feel like your team is farming every single time? Do you feel like do you feel like they're asking some dry eye questions? Because obviously that's a big specialty for you guys every single time that they're on the phone.
Well, I thought they were doing the same thing every time, but we use uh Ring AI and we actually listen to the calls. And we went through and we have someone that's listening to pretty much every single one of our calls now. Uh, we get feedback. AI does it, but we also go through and listen on our own and audit the calls, and then we get feedback of, hey, we're not doing this. That the department meetings that we have, we'll talk about make sure we're doing this. Like the past 2 weeks, I've had the same conversation. Every single patient gets this question. Every single patient, we verify their phone number because we're having these things bounce when we send recall texts out. Like they see the why, but then we're emphasizing it. We track farming as a KPI. We talk
Nice.
about it every single meeting that we talk with the techs and the opticians because they will answer phones and make appointments. And we give shout outs to small victories. Like we have a staff member that has four occurrences uh this month where she's gotten multiple people to schedule. Another one that has three, and there's a you see them kind of they want the recognition. They want that internal like
Fantastic.
competition. So we're creating that environment, but it's all like great job, keep it up. I'm proud of you guys type mentality.
Yeah. So if I think about from a what makes a system work standpoint, is that you have a set of expectations. So kind of your baseline behaviors that you're trying to achieve, and then you have metrics that you measure for performance, and in some cases it's monitoring the behavior. So when you're listening to calls or when you have AI listen to calls, that's an observation, right? So you're observing a behavior, and you're also observing, and the key here is it's not just to observe the behavior to find the things that went wrong, it's to observe the behavior to find things that went right too, so that you can reinforce both ways, because feedback is really important to get more of the behavior you want and less of the behavior you don't want. And then you're holding people accountable, you're having regular conversations about it, so you're closing the feedback loop so everyone knows what's expected of them, everyone knows how you're going to measure success, and everyone knows that you're going to hold them accountable, and this isn't going to be a set it and Nick introduced a great new phone script, and then 3 months later we've deviated from it, and no one really knows whether that script is being used, because this is where, like, I want to make this distinction really really clearly for the audience, because this is where most offices go wrong, and this is where things fall apart. You're going to hear this episode. You're going to say something like, "Oh, you know what? I am not doing farming in the office." And farming, for everybody who's not super familiar with the concept, it's the ability to ask, and who else in your household needs an eye exam. And what we find is that 15% of the time they're going to give you another name, and that is fantastic free money. That it's like, if you got the schedule openings, just ask the question, right? So everyone listening to this episode is going to say, "Okay, yeah, I should be doing farming." Then they're going to go and take some sort of action. And oftentimes that action is, let me review the phone script. Let me talk to Debbie, who's on the phone every day. Let me make sure that she knows farming, whatever. And you may, even if you're doing the most sophisticated version of that, you're going through your phone script, you're adjusting the phone script, you're role playing with your team to make sure that they understand what farming is. And then you're like, okay, we rolled it out. Great initiative. We're rolling it out. And the second part of that whole system, which it sounds like you're doing really well, but the second part of that system is measuring, observation, and feedback. And that may, for some people, happen for a little bit of time just to make sure they're actually doing it. But the consistency of it as the business grows and scales, it is, and as you have more initiatives, it is the job of management to keep track of all of the things that are core KPIs. And as you add more initiatives, you may have more KPIs and more people accountable for certain things or whatever. And the manager gets overwhelmed and there's fires to put out, whatever. And I didn't have time to review the AI call reports this week and next week too, and the week after that. And all of a sudden, I don't know if the people are doing the same thing on the phone that I expected them to. And what I loved about what you said when you answered that question is, well, we thought they were, but we actually know different. And so we're making some corrections and we're already bringing it up in staff meetings. That's what a system is. It's not just writing down the procedure in a well documented procedure in a document that everyone can access and training people once on it. It is the consistent observation, reinforcement, and structured measurement of a particular behavior or of a particular set of behaviors that ultimately leads to an outcome that everyone can get behind. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And that's you're hitting the nail on the head of what it means to be the CEO and my biggest hurdle that I'm trying to jump to scale, because this has taken a huge amount of effort, manpower, whatnot. And even now I'm like, well, I'm the one enforcing it. The office manager is. And you mentioned it, and what you were talking about is the more KPIs you have, the more things you have, how do you keep that consistency when you get bigger? Or if you're not the one in the office, because most doctors know that when they're not the one in the office or whatnot, things are invariably going to slide down a little bit. Now, if it's a 10% decline, maybe we can overcome that. But if it's 20, 25%, at what level is it not the same practice? Is it not the same system that you have to, and that's having a hierarchy, having an org chart, who reports to who and who's responsible for these things. At this point right now, we talked about this last episode, but I have a scorecard that has everyone's numbers on it. Every Monday, they come into the office and they know where their numbers are. And it's the same KPIs for the past 2 years, which is cool because you can hear them talking like, oh, my exam, like a staff member, we're not making a big deal about it, but she's like, my like, can you tell Dr. Lillie my exam only rate is not, they're not buying, it's not my fault. Like it's just I'm getting a lot of the handoffs that there's no prescription forms. The doctor said it. Like it's not my fault. But they're, and like, oh, you're fine, don't worry. But I love that they're aware of it. The things that I'm emphasizing, they're tracking on their own and they see their number and they want to be not the weak link, right? And that's why our systems work, is they have that feedback mechanism, and there's a peer, almost like, it's funny because you'll see one of my techs, like I'll hand off to a tech and they're like, hey, this is a contact lens patient and you know your numbers are down a little bit. You can have this one. I'm like, all right, hey, they're helping you. I like that environment. It's not competitive in a negative sense, but they'll help each other out with numbers. And that person that's taking it, like, absolutely, my contact numbers need to be a little bit better. So let's go. Take it and go. So it's cool to see how if you give them the right guidelines or metrics, they'll self-police. They'll make your systems work with the right kind of feedback.
And that's the goal, right? And I'm curious what you just said is like, how did you get it to that point? And also, how many hours a week do you spend meeting with people, and how do your meetings work in the office? Because I imagine those two questions are related.
So my meeting schedule, every uh, Sunday night, I will send out an email to my management team, and that's my office manager and my marketing manager. And I'll go over wins for the week. We'll talk about KPIs. I'll talk about how the optical is performing, and then I'll have anything that's on my mind, like, hey, this is a weakness that I think we need to be aware of, or it allows me to think big picture, like not in the moment, not the trees, but this is in the forest. I think we're a little weak. If someone's out, we need another tech to do our advanced treatment. So put that into the ether so other people are thinking about it. Then with my managers, I'll assign like, hey, I want, what's the outcome for Mrs. Johnson? Or have you talked to staff member about her exam only rate. And then I'll list out my department meetings. So on Mondays, I meet with my techs. On Tuesdays, I meet with my opticians. On Wednesday or Thursdays, I'll meet one on one with my doctors and my manager. But I outline that at the beginning of the week, Sunday night. By Monday afternoon, my managers will reply for any action items I put out to them. We spend about 15 to 25 minutes Mondays talking to the techs and going over like phone script. Are we answering the phone? What's our farming numbers? We review our KPIs, and then anything that I want to make sure we're aware of, a new initiative, like new doctor coming on, how are we going to schedule him? Make sure that they're all on the same page. Then when we go to optical, a lot of that's been um, realizing that they have more tools than they've been utilizing. How do we save the sale? What do I do to approach that? How do the doctors hand off to you? Are we doing it differently? Where can we be better? And it gives them a voice to like, no one's like calling each other out, but they have a voice of like what we're doing wrong. And
Hmm.
our culture is really big on like being open to those conversations. And then on Thursdays, I give the doctors a one-on-one, and that's more me listening. What are your needs? Any concerns that you have? What can I do to help you out? Now, occasionally I'm going to put in my, hey, we need to work on this, or come into the exam and watch what I do. This is a case that I had, and I like to use what I do as an example and just say, just use that for what you will. You don't have to do this, but this is what I did and it worked. And eventually you start seeing them, they'll mimic that behavior or they'll do something similar. And we share that. When I talk to my manager in a one-on-one, the first half of it is all about her. How are you feeling? What can I help you develop? Or when you had this patient come in, what was your thought process? And I try to coach her and how to be a leader, because that's not something that comes natural to everyone. And it's what's happening in your life. Is there anything else that I can do? What do I need to be aware of? Then we take a break, go to lunch, and then we come back, and then we'll go over the meeting. Okay, we need to work on our exam onlys. We need to talk about how they're talking about second pairs of sunglasses, and we'll go over the outline for the office, and then we repeat, and we do that every single week, and we've done that for the past year. Now, my manager, I had to sit in with him for the first year and a half, but she has one-on-ones with every staff member in the office.
Hmm.
I sat in on those for the first year to kind of coach her on how to do those to be more effective. And we're to a point now where I have to manage the doctors and her. She can sit on those one-on-ones. And if there's anything that she needs to call me in on, I will go in. But she's managing the staff and the day-to-day, which is great because now my staff has a way to communicate. It's not all through me.
Hmm.
There's levels, there's layers, which has made things a lot better too.
So if I'm a staff member in your practice at any level, let's say I'm an entry level tech, just to clarify, every week I'm getting a one on one with the office manager, and every week I'm participating in a group meeting in a group department meeting, so to speak.
Absolutely. Yep.
And so, and I kind of challenge everybody. And by the way, do you have morning huddles or anything like that in your practice?
Yep. Every morning, every doctor goes over their schedule. They'll go over what they purchased last year and then any notes about their care or if we want special testing done. We do that for every patient, and we've done that. I've done that since I've been open every single day. We do that. And then once a month we have an office meeting, 8:30 to 9:30. We shut down the office and have a all hands on deck meeting.
Got it. Um, so that is I challenge everybody listening to think about the meeting cadence and schedule in your office and whether it is as rigorous as this, and also whether the team has enough exposure to, because I imagine these one-on-ones create a culture of, okay, well, here's what you're doing well, here's where you can improve, here's a behavior we want to manage, here's a metric we want to potentially see as an outcome of that behavior. And all of those things are you have to be able to give your team one-on-one or one-to-many attention to be able to do that. So Nick, as you're describing this, I'm hearing you talk about, like, you're exploring what it means to be the CEO of your practice. And it does mean more meetings, but it's not pointless meetings. These are meetings where it sounds like there's a pretty clear agenda. What your team meetings, is that like, does it flow the same way every single time, or does it kind of bounce around?
When we do an all hands or we do a department meeting.
The department meetings and all hands.
Yep. They're very consistent in in flow, but the content is always adjusting. For example, we had an office meeting today, and the past 2 weeks we've been talking about our exam only initiatives and how we're going to accomplish that. Well, I talked a lot about that. So this meeting today was more of a, we have an optimized vision sheet. So every supplement we sell and every product we have, we went over the why. Why do we do that? And it was me asking them, and they had to answer amongst each other, like why they think that. And then I had the doctors explain our reasoning behind it and methodology to try and make it so we're all saying the same message. If they talk to a front desk tech, if they talk to an optician, if they talk to a doctor, we're communicating the same messaging in the same language, which again makes a patient feel more secure in what they're getting.
Yeah.
And then go ahead.
Go ahead.
In the department meetings, we always review the scorecard first, and then we go over any objectives that are changes that may be coming up. And then I always leave an open floor. Anything you guys want to discuss? What do you need? How can I make this better? And initially there was a little hesitation, but when they did put a suggestion out and I acted on it immediately, you get more suggestions. When they start doing things and you start hearing them and making the changes, absolutely, we're gonna listen to what you say and we get more feedback because they see the benefit of sharing.
Okay, we're going to take a short break, and I have more questions for you. But is it okay after the break? One of the things we do is we kind of place a marker on this point in your journey because you have accomplished so much, and then I can also give you a little bit of feedback of some of the things that I'm hearing you say, and I'm like, "Ooh, you're like totally the CEO of your practice." And if you want to be a CEO of a practice that continues to scale and optimize itself, one of the things that I'm like, "Ooh, like what if you could." To twist this knob a little bit further to the right and pull this lever a little bit harder on this run. Okay, if I give you some feedback after the break too?
Maybe better, man. That's why I'm here.
All right, fantastic.
Hey there, it's Eugene, and I want to let you in on something. So, you've been to conferences before, you've come home fired up, and then Monday morning hits and it's back to the grind. The ideas don't stick, the plan never gets made, and 6 months later, your practice is in the same place. So, I know that pain. I've been to those conferences with you, and that is not happening at this new event called I Care Boss Live. You've heard the story of I Care Boss, and now there's an event, I Care Boss Live. It's September 16th through 18th in Cleveland, 2.5 days. We're bringing together 200 of the best practice owners in eye care for a one of a kind event that combines speakers, peer learning, mastermind groups, and industry innovation, all designed around one goal. You leave with a 90-day plan and you can actually execute it and get stuff done. And we're going to tackle some real stuff: exam only rates, revenue per patient, people problems, leadership, AI and technology, specialty growth, the things that keep people up at night. We're going after it. And we're doing it in a room full of practice owners that are just as serious about growth as you are. This is not a conference. It's not a seminar. It's something different. There are only 200 spots. So if you want to be in on this, this is not publicly announced, just on this podcast. Go to thepowerpractice.com, click events, click apply now. This is invite only. It's not for everybody. So you have to apply. We'll ask you a few questions. And if it's a fit, we'll invite you to register. This event, I Care Boss Live, is going to sell out. Do not sit on it. I invite you to apply right now.
All right, we're back on the Power Hour. Dr. Nick Lillie, and he is talking about his journey of becoming the CEO of his practice. And there are a number of things that you've covered so far. So, number one that I'm extremely impressed with is anytime you want a desired behavior, you're documenting that behavior, you're teaching people that behavior, but then you're also measuring something about the input of that behavior you're observing, and then you're providing consistent, clear feedback. And what I think people probably realize is that any behavior that you're going to measure like that, monitor like that, it takes management capacity. And so one of the things we'll talk about shortly is like, is your time better off generating $700 per patient and seeing however many patients you can see per hour, or is your time, because it's a significant impact financially on the business, right? Like what, um, but or is your time better off doing some of the management things that you're doing and making everybody else better? Because that's a trade-off that everyone feels. Like this whole CEO mentality is like, well, like I want to do all of those things. I want to monitor my phone calls and my exam onlys and the this and the, but I want to monitor each of those initiatives. But in order to do it right, I can't just introduce it and move on, and see more patients. I have to be able to work on to work on some of the individual initiatives and have the management capacity. So let me ask your opinion on that. Is as you're bringing on this additional associate, you're putting somebody that you've been training into the exam lane. How many hours are you scaling back, and what are you going to, in terms of patient care, and what are you going to do with those hours?
So when I first hired the first associate, uh, before I did, I worked Monday through Friday, and we closed at noon on Fridays, anywhere from 1 to noon, so 9 to 1. And I was seeing by myself probably about 85 comprehensive exams a week. Okay, so quite a bit.
Hmm.
Uh, when I hired her, I took off my Thursdays. I'm not seeing patients on Thursdays was the plan, and not seeing patients on Fridays. That was really hard initially because I had doubled my overhead and my staff, and patients would wait to schedule with me because we didn't have a good pre-appointment process, which we've fixed, and we've improved that. So the schedule was wide open so they could always get in, and then they were willing to wait. So they would wait and schedule with me, and I'm like, I need to see patients. I can't block off this time. So I opened my schedule back up and just worked my way through it. Fast forward about a year, and then I was not seeing patients on Thursdays or Fridays. All day Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. What I'm going to do now with the new associate coming on, uh, he's going to work full time Monday through Friday. My current associate that's here now does not work Mondays. So I'm going to see patients Mondays and Tuesdays, and I'll do a half day on Wednesdays for the first probably year that he's here, with the idea that I'm probably going to cut off that Wednesday. At that point, I will be able to have more time to develop the optical staff. That's an area that I think we could be better at, our ability to sell and just have those conversations. I want to work on it for the past decade of my life, but I don't have the bandwidth to do it currently. So
So I want to do the math for the listeners. Okay, so you're saying you're taking a day out of your schedule right now, right? When you bring on this associate. So how many patients do you see in that day typically?
uh we'll call it 12 comps.
Okay, so if it's 12 comps and your revenue per patient, I'm just going to say 750, right?
Okay.
That is $9,000 that you are not going to see anymore.
Is
So,
it tough pill to swallow when you say it that way, Eugene?
right. Well, but hold on. I'm going to make it tougher for a second. And then let's say you work 50 weeks out of the year. That's $450,000. I just want to like
Yeah. Yeah,
put the, like that's a heavy number. $450,000 worth of patients that you're not going to, that you yourself aren't going to see anymore. Now, it is very possible that, like, obviously it's not like those patients are going to go poof and disappear. They're still going to be seen in your practice. You're still going to make money off them, but maybe not to the same extent. You still need to tune up this new associate, but you just decided that you're going to invest $450,000, Nick, into making the practice better because you now just took $450,000 off your line. So how are you going to do it? So you're saying, okay, I'm going to work with the optical staff. I'm going to possibly make my associate better. So, like, let's talk about the opportunity cost. So we know what the opportunity cost is. Sorry, well, so we know that that's $450,000. But let's talk about the upside of that $450,000 investment that you're going to make into the operation. So, what are you hoping to achieve?
Time. I want freedom in my time. And the biggest thing that made this resonate with me is when I'm in the office around the other doctors, I'm the most competitive person you'll ever meet. I want to have the best numbers. I want to have the best capture rate. I wanted the ego boost of like, look, see, I can do this. I'm good. But every time I go to a conference, every time I go to one of my mastermind meetings, you know, I always have more fun because I'm thinking about the business. I'm thinking about what we can implement, what we can change, what we can do, how we can be better. And my mind gets to be free. and see the possibilities. Not that Mrs. Jones is mad or coming in for an RX check, or I have to really go after this, my dry eye conversion rate. I see what the practice can be and what kind of business I can have and the life that I want to live. And I used to think it was the magic of the meetings. It was just because I wasn't in the day to day and I could separate myself away from that. And that's when the magic happens and when you can make your business better. I want that on a weekly basis. So the ability for me to get that time to work on the business. I know it's a cliche thing to say, but it really is awesome to have a plan and then see it through and see it in a 90-day period what you can accomplish. It I talked to my manager, and when we did this the past 2 quarters, I looked at her and I said, "We've never been so efficient. We've never accomplished so much." It's like, "Well, we had a plan and we stuck to it." I go, "Yeah, but we've had plans in the past. What's different?" And it's the fact that I had time to make sure the systems were in place to make it happen. And that I want to see at a bigger level. More doctors and develop them and make the business better, man.
Well, and it's really interesting because what I hear you saying is I'm going to make an investment in my business, but I'm also going to get freedom of time of it. And so there's two parts to this, and I'm going to kind of play it out for you. So we said $450,000. Again, it's not really $450,000 that you're losing because chances are of that $450,000, I, some your associate will be some percentage as good as you in seeing those patients. Well, let's call it 80%, let's call it 90%, but eventually, hopefully, 100% as good as you with the systems that you're building and maybe even better. But in the short term, let's just take that $450,000 and divide it by, I think you do, I'm going to guess like about 3,000, 3,200 refractions a year, right? So if that's the case, my thinking is that you are, that you have to improve your revenue per patient. If you're holding all other things constant and you're just trying to get an extra $450,000 out of your practice, you have to get revenue per patient up by $150 per patient, right? One way
Yep.
to do it.
Yep.
But that's if those patients weren't going to be seen in your practice. Now let's assume they are seen in your practice and that instead of 450,000, you're generating, uh, you're generating 300,000 from those patients in the short term, right?
Yep. Yep.
Which then leaves a $150,000 gap. And so then the question becomes, okay, well, that $150,000 gap divided by 3,000 refractions, that's roughly $50 per patient that you have to get better at. And that to me seems very doable with systems. And the cool part about that is that as you implement those systems, the way that you're doing it, Nick, is that those systems last forever, right? This is not a once a year thing. This is an annuity that you get to take into the future of your business over and over and over again and kind of collect on this annuity every single year. If it's $50 per everybody's patient in the future for the lifetime of your practice, that investment is in the millions very, very, very quickly. That the return on that investment is in the millions very, very quickly. So I like to think about it that way. Like, and it's just like, what's the immediate impact of CEO level activity? One of it is freedom of time for you, but the other part is you're getting to spend more time building those systems and then creating the accountability behind those systems. Now, I want to take a moment and kind of ask you a few questions if you're okay with this, as you kind of asked me to do a little bit of the make me better type of thing. Is that let's break down some of the things that you said at this point in your journey. I think you mentioned having a vision is the most important thing. I totally agree with. So when you after you wrote your vision, how far out is your vision?
When I did that, I was thinking, uh, I went, when we first talked about it, the vision was 10 years. I want 10 million in 10 years was a thing that I kind of put out there, the big goal, right? And then I was like, how do I want to do that? What does my practice life look like in that sense? So I'll say 10 years was when we first started thinking that. In my mind, I thought long term, like, what do I want to do when I'm like 60 years old? How do I want to be running this? But 10 years was the number that we initially talked about.
Yeah. So that is so what we think about is like, okay, that's a great long term goal. A lot of folks describe that goal as I think there's Jim Collins actually calls it a BHAG, big hairy audacious goal, right? And that's a 10-year goal is a BHAG. What's interesting though is when we think about um, visions that I've seen that have been super effective inside of practices, is if you take, and I do this every year for my business too, is that if you take a look and you say, what do I want this thing to look like in 3 years, and not just like core numbers, core KPIs. Like we could say, this is what our revenue is going to be. This is how many patients we're going to see. This is the experience we're going to deliver. This is the number. This is the number of patients that are going to become dry eye patients. This is the number of patients that are going to be shopping in our optical. We're going to be well known for this and this and this. Those are all like great descriptors. But in a 3-year vivid vision, which is a concept I learned from Cameron Harold, is that 3-year vision. It's written in present tense, and so it literally starts with we are, and I'm making this up, but it is July 1st, 2029, and our business is thriving. We have X number of dollars in revenue. We have X number of patients that we're seeing every single day. Our team meetings feel like this. We're discussing that. We're doing this. We're doing that. And you really like, and the idea is that your team reads that vision and they literally could just close their eyes and picture themselves walking through this practice and feeling what's the energy, what are the meetings like, what are the KPIs that are important, what are we doing to serve the patients, how are we seen in the community, like you literally like, and it's a document that doesn't have to be like a one pager. I believe that it's a document that's in depth, and then that vision you can update. That the trick is, you don't have to like wait 3 years and see if you hit it. You can update that vision every single year. Like this, what I do at the end of every single year for our team is I rewrite the 3-year vision so they can always see what the 3-year picture looks like. They can always picture because there's things that change naturally with the market, with the thing, with something new happens or whatever. But to your point, it's the question becomes, does this support the vision? And that question becomes much easier to answer. Now, once you have the vision, because it's only 3 years out, it's pretty easy to say, well, what do we have to do in the next 12 months so that we're set up for success 3 years out, right? And it becomes a lot easier to set your 1-year goals, and then to say, okay, well, like this is what the focal points of our business look like. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I did this with my associate when we had our first one-on-one. Sat him down, said, "Where do you want to be in a year?" And then he said that. Like, okay, these are the goals. How are we going to do that in the next 90 days? And then we broke it down. And I go, these are the things we're going to look at. This is how we're going to do that. And it's helped our training because I'm like, I keep going back to this. So it is just doing it on a bigger scale for the business, but it's the same thing you do with your staff development, right? You
Mhm.
want them to see the steps and you break it into bite-sized chunks
Yeah, and
and go
you're
after
already
it.
getting there 100%. I love that because and that's exactly it, is that you go 3 year to 1 year to then the next quarter. So, and we know we got to get done in the next year. So what needs to happen in the next 90 days in order to make sure that thing that we don't totally blow it on that 1 year thing, right? And and then it's much easier to recognize, to take that quarter and break it down into 13 weeks and then say, okay, well, what do we got to do every week? Like if we're not getting better at this every single week, we're not going to get there. Or if we got, a 4-step goal that we're trying to accomplish in a quarter, let's say, bring in a new line of something or other. Well, like that 4-step goal, if we're not making progress on it every couple weeks, we're going to get to the end of the quarter and it's not going to get done.
And the beauty of that, Eugene, is it's a razor. Hormozy always talks about having razors in life and decisions, right? Well, once you do that, then you go to the Vision Expo West or Vision Expo and you're like, oh, I want to buy that shiny new object. Well, does
Hmm.
that align with where you want to go? No, then don't even look at that.
Right.
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 It helps streamline what you want to do. Now, if you're going to go buy that, you got to change everything else because apparently your goals are not aligned. You weren't bought in. It's really clarified what I say yes to, what I say no to, and where I'm going to put my time and energy. It's very clarifying to have that what you've described.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. Like the question I always ask when I hear when I hear a shiny new object, something, or, and I really appreciate sometimes, our team brings me cool ideas and that kind of thing. One of the things I always ask is, does this support the vision? Well, I'm not sure. Okay, go reread the vision and come back to me with an answer. And like,
Absolutely.
if you say yes, I need to know exactly how it supports the vision. I need you to be able to articulate it to me. I need to know that when you're bringing me an idea, you understand the vision in its entirety, and that you're able to and you're able to articulate how this initiative supports the vision. Which kind of brings me to the second point, just the second optimization I wanted to offer you, is that I love what you're doing with the accountability side of the equation. You're having regular meetings. You're asking people for ideas, for feedback, and that you're also sending out this kind of a Sunday directives kind of thing. I wanted to make a suggestion, and the suggestion is, let the staff manage. Let the staff bring you the ideas. Let the staff bring you the solutions. And so the way I would optimize this is, you can still send out your Sunday emails, but on Friday, you want your leaders to send you their thoughts, their ideas, so that you can incorporate it into your Sunday emails, and you can adjust it, right? So then that way they're not sitting waiting for you to tell them what to focus on, what to do, whatever. You should have a list of questions that they answer for you on Friday. How did we do this week? What did you notice? What did you see? And then the reality is, then the what you're transitioning from is, Nick, looked at the numbers and had all the ideas and did but what you're really trying to transition to, like, fast forward a life in the day of a CEO 2 years from now in your practice, when you have a much bigger operation and you have a lot more things you need to pay attention to, you have multiple leaders writing in for you. And what you're doing is, you're kind of scanning what they said, and you're saying, okay, this leader needs some development. They're not quite there. This leader's totally on. I'm just going to copy and paste their stuff into our weekly plan. I'm going to take this leader's thing. Oh, you know what? 90% of it's good. We need a little bit more development one on one over here. I'm going to copy and paste the 90%. I'm going to make my own adjustments and add it on. And that's our company plan for the Sunday. In the future, when your leaders are perfectly capable of either 100%, 100%, 100%, they don't even need you. You're not even there. You're not, like, you get to monitor that from a distance. You're moving on to focusing on another thing that you're developing and being able to open another door for the business. But those leaders are the ones doing that particular thing. In the same way, I had to kind of think about that idea in the same way, when you have your department meetings and you say, hey, I'm going to give people are going to bring up concerns. I'm going to kind of jump all over them, and I'm going to get them done, right? I'm going to fix the problems. Great first step. Like, love it. We love first step. People hate bringing up concerns because they don't want to be seen as complainers. We talk about how issues are opportunities. And in fact, we reward people finding issues in practices. And we say, like, hey, best issue of the week, gets a Starbucks gift card, or, whatever. But don't save them for the meeting. Put them on an issues list. And then in the meeting, what you do is you ask people to prioritize, which issues do we want to work on. And you say, okay, that issue, like, I don't know, I'm making this up, but like the broken coffee maker, not so important. But the other issue of, like, the lab taking, way too long to get our orders back to us, that seems like it impacts something that has to do with our vision, which is our overall patient experience. And you guys are the ones who put this issue on here. So and instead of you, Nick, saying, here's the solution, you say, okay, so let's discuss who's got ideas for how we solve this.
No, I mind is blown right now, Eugene. My mind is blown. It's the bottleneck that is myself, like we talked about, 100% me right here, and empowering the staff to do that. And then I can remove myself. And that's one of the barriers I said I need to scale. But we now have a system that allows that to happen without me being present. Love it, man. I love, I'm going to be implementing that ASAP. Like, that's
Well,
awesome.
so this is, and again, this is a lot of the stuff. What I'm seeing you do is so impressive, Nick, and your double digit growth year over year. But watching you live, and I've had such a amazing, I guess it's a gift of being close enough to your practice as you've gone through these various phases of growth. When you were thinking about your new location, to when you were doing your new location, to when you were hiring your new associate, and like watching your mentality shift from, like, I gotta make the business, I gotta make my job better paying, to I have to think about what's the biggest possible picture in multiple locations and possible, whatever that future looks like for you, and watching you shift into that CEO seat. That's why I love talking to you, and I love, watching your journey and all the things that you accomplish on your own. But I'm also happy to share some optimizers that I've learned along the way, so that, and I've seen super successful practices implement, so that you can get to where you're going faster.
Yeah, standing on the shoulders of giants, man. Like, just don't reinvent the wheel. Find the people that have made the wheel and do what they do. You know what I mean? Like, I love that.
Yeah, and it's, and so Nick, always a pleasure to talk to you. I'm going to, I think I'll mention this in the show notes as well, but we're going to invite you to speak at I Care Boss Live, the event in September in Cleveland. For those attending, you get a chance to get a 10-minute practice spotlight into something that Nick does remarkably well, so that you can learn from it. But that's exactly it, is that you have done certain things in your practice that are truly remarkable, and I think people can learn from some particular insights. So we'll do that, and then that's kind of your idea: stand on the shoulders of giants. And so you've done some things that are remarkable. Others have done things that are remarkable. We all just learn from each other and make each other better. So thank you, Nick, for spending some time with me today and helping others who are not necessarily as far along in your journey, or who can learn from your journey, gather some insight.
Appreciate it, man. Always a pleasure. I hope we do it again soon.
Thanks.